Testing, testing. 510, 510. Testing, testing. 510, 510. That's good. Testing. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. Testing. 1, 2, 1, 2, 3, 4. One, two, three, four.
to question the fairness and justice of many of our past and present policies. We are called to play the Good Samaritans on life's roadside, but that will only be an initial act. One day the whole Jericho road must be transformed so the men and women will not be beaten and robbed as they make their journey through life. True compassion is more than flinging a coin to a beggar. It understands that an edifice which produces beggars needs restructuring. A true revolution of values will soon look uneasily on the glaring contrast of poverty and wealth. With righteous indignation, it will look at thousands of working people displaced from their jobs with reduced income as a result of automation, while the profits of the employers remain intact, and say this is not just. It will look across the oceans and see individual capitalists of the West investing huge sums of money in Asia and Africa, only to take the profits out with no concern for the social betterment of the countries and say this is not just. It will look at our alliance with the landed gentry of Latin America and say this is not just. A true revolution of values will lay hands on the world order and say of war, this way of settling differences is not just. This business of burning human beings with napalm, of filling our nation's homes with orphans and widows, of injecting poisonous drugs of hate into the veins of peoples normally humane, of sending men home from dark and bloody battlefields physically handicapped and psychologically deranged, cannot be reconciled with wisdom, justice, and love. A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. So what we must all see is that these are revolutionary times. All over the globe, men are revolting against old systems of exploitation. And out of the wounds of a frail world, new systems and of justice and equality are being born. The shirtless and barefoot people of the earth are rising up as never before. The people who sat in darkness have seen a great light. We in the West must support these revolutions. It is a sad fact that because of comfort, complacency, a morbid fear
Huh?
for taking a stand against the war in Vietnam and for seeking to say to the nation, the issues of civil rights cannot be separated from the issues of peace. I want to say to you tonight that I intend to keep these issues mixed because they are mixed. Somewhere we must see that justice is indivisible. Injustice anywhere is a threat to justice everywhere. And I have fought now too long and too hard against segregated public accommodations to end up at this point in my life segregating my moral concerns. So let us stand in this convention knowing that on some positions, Howard has asked the question, is it safe? Expediency asks the question, is it politics? Vanity asks the question, is it popular? But conscience asks the question, is it right? On some positions, it is necessary for the moral individual to take a stand that is neither safe, nor politic, nor popular, but he must do it because it is right. And we say to our nation tonight, we say to our government, we even say to our FBI, we will not be harassed. We will not make a butchery of our conscience. We will not be intimidated, and we will be heard. Your Majesty, Your Royal Highness, Mr. President, Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, I accept the Nobel Prize for Peace at a moment when 22 million Negroes of the United States are engaged in a creative battle to end the long night of racial injustice. I accept this award on behalf of the civil rights movement, which is moving with determination and a majestic scorn for risk and danger to establish a reign of freedom and a rule of justice. I'm mindful that only yesterday in Birmingham, Alabama, our children crying out for brotherhood were answered with fire hoses, snarling dogs, and even death. I am mindful that only yesterday in Philadelphia, Mississippi, young people seeking to secure the right to vote were brutalized and murdered. I am mindful that of the United States, following the people of India, have demonstrated that nonviolence is not sterile passivity, but a powerful moral force which makes for social transformation. Sooner or later, all the peoples of the world will have to discover a way to live together in peace, thereby transform
See? Well, I mean, you're not going to be able to see me.
into a creative song of brotherhood. If this is to be achieved, man must evolve for all human conflict a method which rejects revenge, aggression, and retaliation. The foundation of such a method is love. The torturous road which has led from Montgomery, Alabama to Oslo bears witness to this truth. This is a road over which millions of Negroes are traveling to find a new sense of dignity. This same road has opened for all Americans a new era of progress and hope. It has led to a new civil rights bill. It will, I am convinced, be widened and lengthened into a superhighway of justice as Negro and white men in increasing numbers create alliances to overcome their common problems. I accept this award today with an abiding faith in America and an audacious faith in the future of mankind. I refuse to accept despair as the final response to the ambiguities of history. I refuse to accept the idea that the isness of man's present nature makes him morally incapable of reaching up for the eternal oughtness that forever confronts him. I refuse to accept the idea that man is mere flotsam and jetsam in the river of life, unable to influence the unfolding events which surround him. I refuse to accept the view that mankind is so tragically bound to the starless midnight of racism and war. Bright daybreak of peace and brotherhood can never become a reality. I refuse to accept the cynical notion that nation after nation must spiral down a militaristic stairway into the hell of nuclear annihilation. I believe that unarmed truth and unconditional love will have the final word in reality. This is why right, temporarily defeated, is stronger than evil triumphant. I believe that even amid today's mortar bursts and winding bullets, there is still hope for a brighter tomorrow. I believe that wounded justice, lying prostrate on the blood-flowing streets of our nation, struggling to be home. Today I come to Oslo as a trustee, inspired and with renewed dedication to humanity. I accept this prize on behalf of all men who love peace and brotherhood. I say I come as a trustee, but in the depths of my heart I'm aware that this prize is much more than an honor to me personally. Every time I take a flight, I'm always mindful of the many people who make a successful journey possible. The known pilots and the unknown ground crews, who are the dedicated pilots of our struggle, who have set it to new controls as the freedom movement soared into orbit. You honor once again Chief Lieutenant with and for his people, are still met with the most brutal expression of man's inhumanity to man. You honor the ground crews, without whose labor and sacrifice, jet flights to freedom could never have left the earth. Most of these people will never make the headline. Their names will never appear in who's who. Yet when years have rolled past, when the blazing light of truth focus on this marvelous age in which we live, men and women will know and children will be taught. We have a finer land, a better people, more noble civilization. Because these humble children of God, willing to suffer for righteousness' sake. I think Alfred Nobel would know what I mean. When I say I accept this award in the spirit of the curator of some precious heaven, which he holds in trust for its true owner. All those to whom truth is beauty, beauty truth, and whose eyes of beauty continue to glow. More precious than diamond, silver, gold. Thank you. Time has come for America to hear the truth about this tragic war. I've chosen to speak about the war in Vietnam today because I agree with Congress that the highest places in hell are reserved for those who, in a period of moral crisis, maintain their neutrality. There comes a time when silence is betrayal. The truth of these words is beyond doubt. But the mission through which they call us is the most difficult one. Even when pressed by demands against truth, men will not easily assume the task of opposing their government's policy, especially in time of war. Nor does the human spirit move without great difficulty. Against all the apathy of conformist thought within one's own bosom, there has never been such a monumental defense during a war by the American people. Polls reveal that almost 15 million Americans explicitly oppose the war in Vietnam. Additional millions cannot bring
Testing, 1, 2, 1, 2.
around. This reveals that millions
Students,
have chosen
if you are here for the comment reading keynote speaker, and you are definitely supposed to be in the Duncan Sky Room, please have a seat so we can ensure we have enough chairs for everybody. Also, if you need to find your professor, please locate them after the keynote speaker because we need to get started so that he has enough time. So please come on in, have a seat, fill up the spots. There are plenty of spots
front. We have a lot of space up in the front. And just be sure that you're supposed to be in this room because it's divided among 4 locations. If anyone is standing in the back, any students, please come up to the front. We still have a few seats left up in front. And you can find your professor later on to sign in. All right, I'd like to welcome you to the keynote address of our Common Reading Program. I'm Professor Constance Wagner, Director of the Writing Program, and co-chair of the Common Reading Committee that actually puts this together for you. I think you'll find this really interesting. Our speaker today is Dr. Joseph McLaughlin, whom some of you may know already, and he is going to give us a look at the history of the university you're attending. So we'll see how St. Peter's came to be, and with a series of fascinating pictures. This is based on a book that Dr. McLaughlin did, so we've got lots of interesting photos and different stories to tell you about the place where you attend. This building, of course, did not exist when most of these pictures were taken, but so you'll see the interesting growth of the university. So, as we said before, you're assigned to this room, that's fine, you're here. You'll sign in with your professor later on if you haven't already. Don't worry about it for the moment. And I know that the idea was that you would actually write a response to this. So please turn off your phones. Don't bury your face in electronics. Your attention should be up here. Okay, thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Connie. Well, it's great to be here with the class of 2020. I look forward to... give yourself a hand. I look forward to being with you 4 years from now in the Garden State Art Center, or whatever it's called today, and we'll be sitting together at your commencement. So what I want to do today is give you a brief history of St. Peter's. It's based on the book that Dr. Thomas Matteo and I co-wrote. He worked in the management marketing. He was a professor of management marketing. He no longer works there. He's retired now. But about, I guess, 5 or 6 years ago, we got together and we put together this pictorial history of St. Peter's College/University. At the time of the writing, it was St. Peter's College. And this photograph is the cover of the book. I chose this as the cover because I just kind of thought it was interesting. This is a portico over McDermott. This is when it was removed. I don't know why it was removed because it's kind of an interesting architectural artifact. And it was over the door that leads into the enrollment center. I like the picture of these 3 guys in their suits and in their academic robes. Do you know what year the students are in? Are they freshmen, sophomores, juniors, seniors? Anyone? Just shout it out. Seniors. How do you know they're seniors? Well, yeah, they graduated. They didn't graduate. Actually, seniors had to wear academic robes. Right? Freshmen, sophomores, and juniors just showed up for school in their suits back in the 60s. But seniors had to wear academic robes, which would distinguish them as seniors. So when they walked around, they were given a certain amount of prestige and status. And we'll talk about that a little later, because this was the idea that of Father Gannon, who was the first dean of the rebuilt St. Peter's College. So this is St. Peter's College. Today we know it as St. Peter's University. And I'm going to take you back, not all the way to today. We're going to start at the beginning. I know that this room is not the greatest room to see slides, but this is a photograph of Jersey City in 1871, right? And in 1871, there were only about 80,000 people living in Jersey City, and 30,000 of them were Catholics. Yet, well, there were 7 churches, and each church, pretty much, I think 6 of the 7 churches had an elementary school, but there were no Catholic high schools, and there were no Catholic institutions of higher education, not only in Jersey City, but in most of New Jersey. St. Peter's Church, and there's a photograph here, all right, is no longer there, but this is St. Peter's Church, and in 1837, all right, the church had 4 priests and 100 parishioners. Think about that for a second, right? Think of the ratio, 1 priest for 25 people. Think about churches today in the ratio, right? A priest to the congregation. So it's very, very interesting. Now this church, as I said, only had 100 parishioners in 1837, but by the 1850s, the church had grown significantly, mostly because of Irish immigration, all right? Around 1820 was the beginning of Irish immigration. 1840s were at the peak of it. So by the 1850s, most of the parishioners in this church were Irish immigrants. And in 1870, the Bishop of Newark, and I think, as far as I could find out, this church was in incredible debt, all right? Like most churches are when they serve the poor, right? Because if you're a church of immigrants, there's not going to be much cash in the collection pot on Sunday. So it was in a lot of debt, and it looked like the archbishop was trying to unload it. So he asked the Jesuits to take over the church. And in 1871, the Jesuits said, okay, and they took the church over. Now, one of the deals was if you take the church, you can start a school. So in 1872, all right, so we're going back, and this is the beginning now of St. Peter's College. The Jesuits wrote to Trenton for a charter as a university, and on April 13, it was granted a charter. So the official beginning of St. Peter's University is April 13th, 1872. However, the first classes didn't start so many years later, and I'll tell you why. Well, they had a change in leadership, and in 1874, Father McQuaid took over, and he wasn't going to build anything until the church was out of debt. Now, people, students of history here know in 1873 to 1878, there was a depression, not the Great Depression, but there was a depression in the United States. All right, so it was a very difficult time, all right, to get out of debt. But unbelievably so, in 1877, the church, because of the large input of Irish immigrants, even though they were immigrants and they were poor at the time, they supported the church with such intensity that it was pretty much out of debt. So in 1878, Father McQuaid decided that he would start the school, right? So it took 6 years from the time the school was chartered as a university till it actually had its first class. And its first classes were on September 2nd, 1878. There were 71 students in St. Peter's College. Ages, 10 to 13-year-olds. Gender, male. So interesting, it was St. Peter's College, but right, with 10-year-olds, 12-year-olds, and 13-year-olds, 11-year-olds, and 13. So it's almost like a junior high school today. But it was the beginning, right? So, and every year they would just add another class until they had actually 7 years of school. So St. Peter's College, all right, was basically a high school college program that lasted 7 years. And we'll talk a little bit about the curriculum in a second. Here's the first faculty. This is the original Jesuits. Now, interestingly enough, right, it's too bad you can't see with their top hats and their long coats on, but doesn't look like a very diverse group of people, does it? However, it is. All right, only one of the original Jesuits here was born in the United States, and the 6 others were born from different nations in Europe. So if it was, it was a diversity, not the kind of diversity we see today at St. Peter's, but it was a diversity just the same. And hope you can see this, because this is the tuition of St. Peter's from 1889 to 1900. Now, I was thinking of asking, our President Kornacki if we can, for 1 year, go back to this. All right, so you had $5 entry fee. It was a quarter, not a semester, but it would be $40 a year. Well, 41, if you count the quarter there, right? And now in sophomore and junior years, there's a charge of $10 per annum for the use of chemicals. So I'm assuming that was in chemistry and biology, but I don't know. Graduation fee, and obviously at the bottom, no refunds. Now, here's the same time period, the curriculum. Now, I think it's probably impossible to read unless you're in the front rows here, but let's just go through freshman year. 5 credits of Latin, 4 credits of Greek, 4 credits of English, 2 credits of history, 4 credits of mathematics, 1 of Christian doctrine, 1 of elocution, and 2 of modern languages. All right? You don't even study science, right, until your sophomore year and continue your junior year. But if you notice, by the time you get out of here, you knew Latin, you knew Greek, you studied philosophy, you studied ethics. Right? There were no electives. Right? This was this course of study. This is what you did. And this was the collegiate department, all right, which was 4 years, in the high school department, I told you before, was 3 years. You add them up, you get 7. Would you think we should go back to this curriculum? Seems pretty exciting, right? All right, so in July of 1902 now, all right, James Fox was the president of St. Peter's College, and he decided that he was going to build a pre-college program, kind of a military school, all right, for young men before they came into the college. And he started this school, and I don't know if anyone could recognize the location of this place, but this is, today would be the present-day Armory. All right, so right up on Montgomery where the parking lot is, this is the site of this school. So all of this has been razed to the ground when they built the Armory and the parking lot next to it. Now the mission of this school, and here's one of the classes, all right? This is how these guys dressed every day. And the mission of the school was threefold. Obedience, right? Because the Jesuits at the time wanted their students to learn obedience. Academic excellence was the second, and the third was physical activities, sports. And I'll read a quote, why sports was one of the 3 and why sports was so important to this school and to Father Fox and to the Jesuit tradition. Sports, and I quote, develops steadiness, self-reliance, self-control, and the ability to subordinate the personal for the common good. So teamwork was very important at Manresa Hall, and it's very important, I guess, should be very important, continues to be very important today. Now, this is the original St. Peter's College building. Some of you who went to St. Peter's Prep, right, know it now as the St. Peter's Prep. All right, so in 1888, this building was built. The first graduating class was in 1889 because there were classes being held in the church. And the first graduating class had 4 students. Okay? 1889, 4 students. By 1896, there were 261 students enrolled. So the school, once it got going, continued to grow. And in 1905, the Board of Education of the state of New Jersey recognized St. Peter's Prep and College, okay, as full fully accredited academic institutions. Right? So, but they were not separately incorporated, so they remained one entity until 1955, oddly enough. So that's the original building, still there today. And the college kept growing, so in 1913, the college acquired this, called the St. Peter's Club. It was a social club down in downtown on Warren, and it was used to house classes and show films and have other social activities. Some of you who went to prep, again, would know this as Mulry Hall, and this is the hall where most of the administration, I think the president or the principal is housed in here, and there's some classes in there as well. And actually, in 1918, all right, this was the actual last graduation ceremony at St. Peter's College because of World War I. All right, so the high school part stayed open, but the college part closed, mainly because Father Rockwell, who was the superior of the Jesuits in the New York province, decided that because a lot of the Jesuits had to go into the army in World War II as chaplains, so there weren't enough Jesuits to teach both in Fordham University and St. Peter's College, and Father Rockwell made the decision that he was going to send the Jesuits to Fordham, and he shut down St. Peter's. Right, so from 1918 to 1930, St. Peter's College was shut down. And this was a real big disappointment, especially for Father McDermott, who gave the commencement address. He was the president, and McDermott Hall's named after him, right? And he was told by the same guy, Father Rockwell, a few years earlier, we really believe in St. Peter's College, and if you develop and expand the school, we'll support you. So actually, he bought a site on Kennedy Boulevard. It cost $100,000 in 1816, I think, 1916 or 1915, where he wanted to expand the college. And when we closed in 1918, the deal fell through, and they wound up selling the property to the state of New Jersey, and now it's NJCU. So St. Peter's University would have, more than likely, if it wasn't closed in World War I, would be on the site of New Jersey City University is today. So it's closed up until 1930. And in 1930, the Jesuits decided to reopen St. Peter's, and they sent this young, feisty priest called Father Gannon to Jersey City. And he became the dean of St. Peter's, the resurrected St. Peter's in 1930. And a lot of the things that we still celebrate today, right, was because of Father Gannon. The peacock is a symbol of St. Peter's. Rising from the ashes was Father Gannon's idea. The college seal was designed by Father Gannon. Michaelmas Convocation was an idea that Father Gannon brought from his years studying at Oxford, the first day of the school year in European colleges. But anyway, Father Gannon was very dedicated to the growth of this place. He later became the president of Fordham University. And he was also a great, probably before anyone else was into advertisement. And he created brochures for the college. And he went out and campaigned to admissions, which is things that weren't done back then. And he put together a brochure, and I'm going to quote for you, how he explained St. Peter's University, or St. Peter's College back then, which I think is kind of interesting. Here we have no scenery. We have no fraternities, no expensive teams, no easy degrees. But we have hard work and real courses for men who have neither the time nor money to waste. Very clear what he considered the vision of St. Peter's at the time. I mean, things have changed, not much, Right? We don't really have much scenery. We have this beautiful building, which you can't show slides in. And we have some big sport teams. But for the most part, the bottom line is that this is a real place for real people who want to get real degrees. And that's why you're here. Right? So some things don't change as much as others. Now, the resurrected St. Peter's held its first classes in 1930, as I told you, on the 5th floor of the Chamber of Commerce building in Five Corners, Jersey City. Some of you who live in Jersey City know this building, okay? And we held, because we couldn't go back to St. Peter's Prep, because St. Peter's Prep thrived during the years that St. Peter's College was closed, and there was no room to conduct college classes down there. So the college had to find a new location. So it temporarily held classes in the 5th floor of this building. And then in 1931, Father Deneen, he's the guy signing the papers in the middle of the photograph, became president. And the reason he became president, he was an incredible fundraiser. Right? So you have Father Gannon, the dean, who's a great promoter, and you have Father Deneen, who is a great fundraiser, and together they built what we know today as St. Peter's University. In 1932, he bought the Young Estate. Right? This is the Young Estate. This was the Edward Young, he died in 1908, so his family still owned this property, and they were trying to get rid of it. And so it was on the market in 1930 for $800,000. All right, and Father Deneen got him down to $200,000. So we bought the Young Estate in 2000 for $200,000 and just basically knocked it down. Now, the Young Estate is what we know today as Deneen, McDermott, and Gannon. All right, so I mean, it was from Kennedy Boulevard, on Kennedy Boulevard, from Glenwood to Montgomery, going about halfway down to Montgomery. So all that land, and the O'Toole Library would have been on what was previously known as the Young Estate as well. Right, so this was a huge piece of property. Right? $200,000 was a great deal back in 1931. So, just a little aside about Mr. Young. He founded a children's home on Glenwood Avenue between Kennedy Boulevard on West Side. And in 1950, there were 39 children from ages 9 to 13 who lived at this home. And it was eventually closed and developed into garden apartments. And ironically enough, in 1984, the college purchased the garden apartments, and we call them today, they're known as Veterans Hall. So there's a lot of connection between Mr. Young and St. Peter's. So you have two of his previously owned properties. So the first building that Father Deneen built, all right, on St. Peter's College in 1934, after we purchased the land and cleared it, was this building here. It's called Collins Gym. Cost to build this, $55,000. Why do you think the first building that Father Deneen built was a gym? You think a college, the first building you build would be a library or classrooms. He built the gym. Have any idea why he built the gym? And it wasn't because of sports. What was that? I can't hear that. Ball of life? I hear you. He built the gym because the gym could be converted into a banquet hall, and he held a fundraiser every month. All right, similar to why we built this building probably, right? Because about every week there's some kind of fundraiser up here as well, or we rent the space out. All right, so he realized that the first building you got to build is the one that's going to bring you income, right? Then you build the library, then you build the academic buildings, because that only comes with money. So it's kind of an interesting way to build a college, right? From the gym up, because ball is life too, right? We know that. Now this is Gannon Hall. This is the second building, and this is in 1936. It's the science building today, named after, obviously, Father Gannon, who left to become the president of Fordham, as I told you before. At this time, when we built this building, 1936, St. Peter's had 400 students, all right? So we started to rebuild very quickly after we were closed down. 20 Jesuits, 20 lay faculty. And then we built the arts building. It's known as the bowling alley. It's on the site of what is today Deneen Hall. And here's another picture of the academic gowns that all seniors had to wear, all right? And it's kind of interesting. You think we should go back to this? Where seniors wear something that distinguishes them from the other students after studying here 3 years and earning it. You think they should have a certain distinct status or no? Something like this? You know, you can wear that over your shorts. You don't have to have a tie on. But it's interesting. But as you can see, right, things have changed pretty dramatically, at least fashion-wise. You know, first of all, the school was all male then, and all males had to wear ties and jackets to school every day. So it was a much different society back in the 30s, 40s, and 50s when these rules were implemented. Now, the college has a rich tradition of famous people coming, right? Obama spoke here when he was running for president in his first term. I don't know if you can tell by the back of his head, but that's Father Deneen giving some kind of a scroll to Franklin Roosevelt, who was the president of the United States at that time. And Roosevelt used to come to Jersey City because the guy sitting next to him on the right, the bald guy, that's Mayor Haig. And I don't know if you ever heard of Mayor Haig. If you're in my Contemporary Cities class, you will hear of Mayor Haig. He was the mayor of Jersey City from 1917 to 1947. And he was a real political player, right? He's a boss. He was one of the original boss, and there's a lot of books written about Mayor Haig and this power that he yielded. But anyway, Mayor Haig helped President Roosevelt get elected in 1932 by basically delivering the New Jersey vote for Roosevelt. So he came to Jersey City many times because he was indebted to Haig for his presidency. So that's, I think, right on Kennedy Boulevard. There's some kind of parade going on. And then World War II hit. Now, luckily, during World War II, we didn't close. Right? We were strong enough. The Jesuit province was committed to keeping this place open. But what we had to do, all right, because there was such a demand, all right, for men to go into war, is that the president of St. Peter's at the time decided to condense 4 years of study into 3. So if you see at the bottom, you entered your first year as a freshman in March of 1945, it says here, right? And the war was was over by then, but this continued. I couldn't find earlier pictures. And you graduated in December of 47. So what they did is just condense the semesters into more compact, and in 3 years you got your degree, rather than get your degree in 4 years. And it continued. It started in September of 1942, and I think this was the last year that it was enforced. So after the war, this is when the college really started to grow because a lot of the soldiers came back. This is Father Shanahan, all right, who was the president after the war of St. Peter's College. And actually, Father Shanahan was an important part of the regrowth after the war. There was a real happy feeling after the war, right? And especially in the United States, but especially here at St. Peter's. And here, there was actually 2 live peacocks on campus, all right, after the war. And they used to live in the alley behind Gannon Hall and I think Collins Gymnasium. they didn't last too long because I don't know if you ever had a peacock as a pet, but I hear they're pretty loud, right? And then pretty unruly. So, but it's interesting that they had them at one time. And very beautiful bird. So now we're at 1949. Or actually, no, this is around mid 60s. And this is an aerial photograph. Now, what we see, right, is Kennedy Boulevard. You see St. Peter's Hall. Across from St. Peter Hall, you see McDermott, Deneen, and behind Deneen, Gannon. That was the Young Estate. So by 1960s, 4 buildings, right, and the Collins Gym was behind the Young Estate, Gannon. You can't see it in the photographs. So by the 1960s, we pretty much established ourselves and who we were, on Kennedy Boulevard. In fact, that's where the nickname, the Harvard on the Boulevard, came, right, during this era. All right, so it only took 30 years or so to transform it from temporary classes on the top floor of the Chamber of Commerce to 4 modern, at the time, buildings on Kennedy Boulevard. And by 1966, just to show you how rapidly St. Peter's grown, we had from 30 to 66, we had 6,775 degrees granted. All right, from 1949 to 66, there were 5,651. So the real growth was around the end of the 40s to the middle of the 60s. And then everything changed when Father Yanatelli came. Now, here's Father Yanatelli, all right, and he took over as president on September 8th, 1965, right? And he served as president for 13 years. He was the 18th president of the college. And during his time here, the college doubled in size. The enrollment doubled, and he added 3 new buildings, right? The Pope Hall, the O'Toole Library, and obviously the Yanatelli Recreation Center were all built in the 13 years he was here. So we doubled in size and pretty much doubled the number of buildings we had. He's extremely active in not only in our community, but extremely active at the university, but in the local community. In fact, his supporters tried to get him to run for mayor of Jersey City, which he would have won, except that he was not granted permission to do so by his superiors. But I'm sure that if he did, he would have won, without a question. So September 20th, 1965, all right, first thing Father Yanatelli did, invited Dr. Martin Luther King. All right? So Dr. Martin Luther King, this year would be, 2 days ago, was the 51st anniversary of Dr. King coming to St. Peter's. And he spoke in Michaelmas, and he was granted an honorary degree. So Dr. King, at that time in 1965, not many people were inviting Dr. King. In fact, when we invited Dr. King, there were all kinds of demonstrations and letters and bomb threats for inviting him to this university. But Father Yanatelli, as I told you, was a dynamic guy. He did not care. He invited King. Dr. King gave him an honorary degree, so Dr. King has a degree from St. Peter's. Right? The same degree that you will have someday. You will share with him. All right? So that's something that's, I think that is something you can be very proud of. So, in fact, today we heard Dr. King, right? And actually, ironically enough, there is a big celebration of Dr. King going on right now in I think Roy Irving Theater. So there was just a mix-up in scheduling, but you're not there, you're here, but we're going to honor King here. So the 60s were a turbulent era. All right, and on most campuses, there was a lot of trouble. St. Peter's, not too much trouble, until around 1966, when the Board of Trustees decided to allow women to come. And this was one of the, give a hand to the women, come. But would you believe it? The men were protesting against women coming into the university. Right? And buttons were made. It's a man's school. all right, and demonstrations. There were sit-ins, but the first class came, right, in 1966, and here's 5 of the first women. It took about 2 weeks for everyone to get used to this idea, right? Because as soon as the women came, and all the young men who here kind of, not instantly, but very quickly understood that this is the way it's going to be. These women are going to contribute to the academics and social life of the college, and they will, by the end of the beginning of the first semester, they were pretty much accepted by everybody. Ironically enough, 62%, I think, of women make up 62% of the enrollment of women at St. Peter's University. So in 1965, there were none, all right? And 50 years later, right, this is the 50th anniversary of women, we have 62%. So maybe you women want to start a button that says this is a women's school. Nah. So for my friend who thinks ball is what? All right, well, here's a picture of 1968. All right, Coach Don Kennedy, famous Hall of Fame coach. All right, St. Peter's basketball team finished the season 24-4. Went to the NIT, which at that time was bigger than the NCAA tournament. It was in Madison Square Garden, and they beat Marshall in the first round, 102-93. The next opponent was the 10th-ranked Duke University. Peacocks won 100-71. Right? We are the only school in the United States that is undefeated against Duke. 1-0. The crowd in Madison Square Garden was 19,500. It was the largest crowd to ever attend a college basketball game at Madison Square Garden at the time. All right? Now, I've spoken to many people about this game, and if everyone who told me was at this game, then I would have to estimate the crowd to be at least 50,000 people. Because after St. Peter's won, right, everybody who knew St. Peter's was at this game miraculously. But Elnardo Webster, right, that's Dr. Elnardo Webster, who's number 30. He had 50 points in that game. And he's on our board of trustees now. If you ever see, he's around a lot. So if you ever see Elnardo, he's about 6'7". He's a little bit heavier than there. He was a forward at the time. He's still around and a member of our college board of trustees. So I told you, though, the women wasn't the only controversy back in the 60s. In 1968, actually, there was a demonstration outside of McDermott. The issue was about a couple of faculty were dismissed, and the students were a little bit upset about that. And then they were also upset about, in 1968, if you were a student at St. Peter's, you had, all male students anyway, had mandatory, had to be in the ROTC, mandatory. It was required that you had to go into the ROTC, which was an officer training program here at St. Peter's. So students were kind of demonstrating against that, thought it should be optional. At this time was the Vietnam War. All right, there were a lot of demonstrations all over the country against Vietnam, against military intervention on the global scene. So there was a strike, and the students actually occupied. That's Father Ryan, right? He was the vice president of the college at the time, and they took over his office. And it's interesting. While this was going inside the office, there was a counter strike going on outside. Right? So which was just as big as the strike that was going on inside. So we were kind of divided here at St. Peter's. Right? Half the people were against war in the military, the other half were for it. So there was a strike, there was a counter strike. Basically what happened at the end was, we weren't required anymore to go to ROTC. The dress code, which wasn't really enforced at all in the 60s was taken off the books, even though people stopped wearing suits and ties probably in the late 50s. And then I'm going to skip ahead to 2008, and this is a historical moment because this was the first time we had a lay president. Right? Up until 2008, all the presidents were Jesuits, and this Dr. Kanaki was inducted as the 22nd president, the first lay president. And in 2012, under Dr. Kornaki's leadership, we were granted the status of a university. And you know, the story's going to continue. Maybe 50 years from now, one of you will be up here talking about the history of St. Peter's, right, from the 2000s up into 2050. But that's it. I want to leave a little time at the end if anyone had any questions. But in about 5 minutes, if anyone has a question. If there are no questions, you are free to leave. Or if you have a question, you're free to come up and ask me. What? What?
Do make sure that you give your instructors your reaction paper, and I think before you flee, we should give Dr. McLaughlin a big hand.
Yeah. Oh, you're welcome. They were overwhelmed. Well, that's it. I was done.